I like that you said just giving permission, because I think most of us literally drag our body. Like, we are so disconnected from our bodies. We are like, it's like we are from our head up, and we're just dragging our bodies around. And if people are like, what do you mean? And it's like, just simply noticing, are you thirsty? Like, are you hungry? Like, we are operating on this autopilot. And when you really do tune in, it's like, oh, okay, this doesn't feel as like scary as I thought. This does give me a lot of like information that I can tune into.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency in Iowa.
And I'm Krissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of our behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from Kansas City. She's got a private practice doing mental health therapy in the Kansas City area as a licensed clinical professional counselor. But she also was coming up against some barriers to counseling. We talk a lot on this show about all of the barriers that there are to starting counseling and why people don't start counseling. And so our guest today is Reilly Dodd. She has been turning her attention to empowerment of people to start counseling, to overcome some of those barriers to counseling by spreading that message in ways that are more accessible to more people, and also doing a lot of work to destigmatize counseling, which we know is a huge barrier for people to start counseling. So welcome, Reilly. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you.
Wonderful. So in Kansas, you are called a licensed clinical professional counselor. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. I know every state kind of has different licenses and what that looks like. So yeah, I'm a professional counselor. And when we get kind of to the final part, it's just the clinical is before our licensed professional counselor. Some states are different. And I have a practice in Overland Park and work with a lot of women, just working through a lot of different struggles.
Great. And you had mentioned you work with EMDR with your clients as well. Can you kind of give a brief little description on what that means and how you use that with your clients?
Absolutely. I describe it as you can do like a top-down approach. So you're really working with your thoughts first. And then you can also do kind of a bottom up. So you really are working with the body. And so I have found a lot of success doing EMDR, which it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, also some somatic work too. I think what I see a lot is our earliest experiences when they're overwhelming and we feel like it's too much, too fast. Those experiences get stuck in our body and are kind of in our nervous system. Our thoughts might not be stuck, but our body is. And like from the book, like the body keeps the score. I really think we have to work with the body for like transformational change. And so when we really have an opportunity to like reprocess some of these things that were maybe overwhelming and traumatic, we're able to, I think, find safety in our body and then be able to form like almost new beliefs that at one time felt like so stuck and so real, like it was just a part of us. I love it. A lot of my clients call it magic because I think they've had some success with therapy, and all therapy is great. Like biggest fan of therapy anywhere. but they have felt kind of an additional transformation when they've done some EMDR work or somatic work or body work.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, I mean, that transformation that you're talking about, the magic that you're talking about, it's kind of like stepping into a parallel universe at times, where green is blue. And, the things that we always thought were green, we grow up and we think, oh, yeah, the grass is green and trees are green. And then if we wake up one day and all the grass is blue and all the trees are blue, and we go, oh, I didn't know the grass could be blue. I didn't know the trees could be blue. Those same kinds of things that feel like truth to us. Thoughts that we have about ourselves, thoughts that we have about the world, thoughts that we and beliefs that we have about where we fit with other people, where we fit within our family, where we fit within the universe. All of these thoughts can feel like truth. And it is our truth, but only in that moment of time. So, when we say, well, that's somebody else disagrees with me, somebody else thinks that the grass is blue, and I think that the grass is green, and that's true to me. I'm not lying that the grass is green. And being able to say, yeah, in this moment, at the age of 39 years old, right, on 3/13/24, it is absolutely the truth that the grass is green. But a year from now, 3 days from now, I could wake up and the grass could be blue. And it doesn't make it any less true. It doesn't make it any less of my truth, when we discover those things about ourselves, or when we're able to see things in a different way.
I love the way you describe that. And I think what happens with a barrier is we get so stuck in thinking like, this is just my life. And these thoughts that I have are like a part of me and my DNA. So it's like, why even try to change? And so it's like, maybe just being open, like maybe being curious that there could be a different way is, I think, hopeful.
Can you give some examples of like when people first come to do EMDR, like what are some techniques that you use in session with them?
Well, it's kind of a wide variety. Even I think sometimes I have clients that are brand new to therapy, and sometimes they've done therapy and they're kind of just coming to do EMDR. So I think both place, like I think you're trying to find a safe space and you're trying to just create this sense of safety. And then what I think when we decide to do EMDR, we're really trying to find some resourcing like within them first. Because our body is wise beyond, it's the wisest thing ever, but we are always turning outward to like look for, like confirmation, to look for answers. And so I think we turn inward to really do resourcing, like really find some safety and figure out like what that feeling feels like, to feel like nurture, to feel wisdom, to feel like safety and protection. And from there, I think then we kind of are able to look at some maybe targets. It could be like just a struggle that they're having in day-to-day life. We can make that an EMDR target and really work through that stuck place.
Can you give us an example of what a target might be?
I think it's such a wide variety. So I think sometimes people come in with like a specific childhood event that they know was very traumatic. And other times it's like, hey, I'm here. I'm walking in the door because I know I need help. And I really struggle with people pleasing, and I don't know how to set boundaries, and I don't know where to go. And so that it can be the smallest little thing of a conversation at work where, you were like, you noticed that you were really triggered and you got really upset and you wanted to say something and you didn't. So we say like, what is the worst part about that situation? What's the belief about yourself? Because we usually have these negative beliefs like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't handle it. What's your belief about it? What are the feelings that come up? And then where do you feel it in your body? And you can just, because I do a lot of attachment-based EMDR, so it's maybe a little bit just a different focus. And then we can just really work with that small target. And it's pretty awesome what can come from that.
Really interesting. Can you talk about the difference then with what you do in counseling versus, I know you mentioned individual and group coaching that you do as well. So what's the difference between the two? That's
such a great question. And I feel like people have questions about that all the time. So what I took to Instagram because I think it was maybe in 2020 where I was noticing an increase in clients walking in the door. I think what maybe a positive that came out of COVID is that more people were turning for mental health support. But it felt very limiting when I had to turn people away because, somebody makes a phone call and they're saying, I'm ready. And then I'm like, oh, I can't take you on, but maybe try these people. That's like such another like phone call they have to make. So I thought maybe how can we get creative? How can we know, I think that mental health support is not accessible and it's not affordable for everyone. How can we create maybe mental health resources in a different way? And I always thought like as a therapist, I couldn't show up on Instagram because this our ethical guidelines we have to follow. And I started like taking courses and I was like, wait, I can show up on I can show up on social media and I can talk about mental health and provide awareness. Maybe there's a way to like reach a larger like audience where we are at least having that conversation. We're starting. So I just started to talk about therapy on Instagram, and it's amazing how many DMs I get that say, "Thank you so much. I started therapy." Like they live in a different state, but because of you, I started therapy. Like that's my favorite thing. And then I said, okay, so I'm only licensed. If a lot of our licenses are kind of different, but I'm only licensed in the state of Kansas. So, but what if I wanted to work with people in another state? Could we do some coaching? Could we do some group coaching or one-on-one coaching? What I was met with personally was like kind of overcoming just like this massive self-doubt in certain aspects of my life. Like I could do therapy, but for some reason, who am I to think that I can show up on social media and talk about these things? So as I was like working through self-doubt, I was also creating these online courses and found that it really resonated with people and they were looking for support and community and to feel less alone. And so then we kind of started, well, let's maybe do mental health differently. It doesn't have to be a one-on-one therapy session. Like, can we kind of take it to this online space where they get to show up every day and have a space to work on things? And it's been really cool. It's different. And I think it's just another way that we can continue to provide resources because, like, as you guys know, there's not enough. Like we could endlessly be putting support out there and still need more people.
Absolutely. It's finding those places where there are people out there looking for this information. They're looking for this kind of group or this kind of support. And for those of us doing it, having this, okay, who's going to do this? And then okay, we're going to do this.
And
Uh,
what
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt. What I see sometimes, I think there's a spectrum of this barrier. So, there's like this extreme like stigma that is like, we have to break through. And then there's people that have like, okay, no, wait, I've seen people have, my friend really benefited. My family's benefited. So they're like more open to it, but it's like, where do you take that first step? And I think you have to feel safe. You have to feel comfortable. So I think that's where you like continue to just spread the word, like what you guys are doing on this podcast, which I think is probably helping so many people. It's like maybe helping those people that are ready just take that next step.
Absolutely. People on the fence about counseling. There's so many of us. There's so many people like, oh, I think that might be right for me, maybe, right? But getting all the information is so important, and being armed with all of that information can really help us feel safer. If I'm going into a cave and I'm going to go exploring, I have my flashlight, sure. But if I have a map of the cave, I am way more excited. I am way more willing to take that exploration and go in that cave and check it out. And I'm going to have more fun when I'm in there if I have a map and I know where the lakes are and I know what to expect when I'm in there. Is so important. And what you're doing on Instagram, what we're trying to do here is just shining a light on that. I think that counseling, therapy in particular, because of the confidentiality aspect, because it's so important, and it is important to have that confidentiality can sometimes feel like it extends out, and it can sometimes gatekeep the information about counseling versus the information about an individual person. And I think that that's kind of spread out and spiraled out. And what we're doing is we're saying, no, therapy in itself is not confidential. What we say in therapy, what we do in therapy is confidential, but the techniques that we're using, that's not just for the therapy session. That is for all week long and all month long. And as therapists, we're encouraging people, no, we don't want to just use these techniques in the room. We want to, or on the screen in the session, we want to use these techniques when we're in the car driving and when we're out at work and when we're in the grocery store line. We just want to be doing this all the time. And so they're for everybody, whether we're in counseling or not. Those techniques and that information about how our brains work and our bodies work is for everybody. And I think that's exactly what you're doing.
That's such a true. I think that's just something we have to continue to talk about, because you're exactly right. I think therapy was so hush hush. Nothing was talked about it. It was like, oh, you go to therapy and then that ended the conversation. But there is so much that can still be discussed. That's not part of our, ethical guidelines of confidentiality for sure.
So you said you took to social media and Instagram when you couldn't take every client on. Can you give us some examples of things that you post on there for people to see?
For sure. So, this was, I think I'm losing track of the years, but 2020, 2021, when TikToks and Reels really became popular, that Instagram was really pushing these Reels. And so it was also a time where they were the dancing Reels. And so I really got out of my comfort zone and would post a dance and also like mental health tip. And for some reason it just took, and a lot of the things I focused on were just things that I, either I was seeing with my clients or feel like it was something that I was working on. And so it was just these like little tips that were like, how to break through this like people pleasing tendencies, or, how to set a boundary, or how perfectionism, this perfectionistic worthiness crunch can keep us from being seen. And, just a few tips. And it was short and sweet, but all of a sudden people were like, kind of like, oh, there's something, even there, there's something that like, I don't know, I'm watching you and I'm reading this, and there's something about it that I'm reading and I'm learning something from this. So it's kind of become a thing. Now it's evolved a little bit because, we evolve. So I've also from that have tried to just create some different resources, like a free online coping skills like course. Because I think sometimes how do people even get through the day? Like a lot of times when people get to counseling, it's like they're so far, they're needing support to just get through the day. So like, let's talk about our window of tolerance, and let's talk about like, how were you ever taught healthy coping skills? I don't think that's like a dinner table, right? Conversation that maybe a lot of us grew up with, but we can develop healthy coping skills. So if this is like, it's like a 20-minute course that you can just take. So just, I think things like that hopefully are spreading more awareness and helping people.
Can you talk about what a window of tolerance is? I love that.
Absolutely. So I think when we think about like our nervous system, we have this, how I describe it is like this, when we are in our window of tolerance, like our ability to, our capacity, like our ability, our stress tolerance. Like when we're in that, I almost feel like we're able to like do life, the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, have a hard conversation, have a little bit of maybe like nerves, anxiety, but we're able to function. So often, I think we either get above, like either like very anxious, so that's kind of hyper, and we are existing in this hyper arousal. So you are existing in anxiety and anger and all the time. So you are literally like, that is your such this small short, and you can just jump there so quickly. So I think our window of tolerance gets really small, especially when we never developed healthy coping skills. I think also when you can be in, get really low. So you're in that more of like depressed state, and like, how can I even get out? And how can I, and that's what, like, how can I numb? How can I even move from this? When we can get back into an understanding, when we can get back into the window of tolerance, I think that's when we can make some change. But we end up, because of our experiences, we get stuck in those, and that's how I think a lot of us are operating.
Krista and I went to a science museum this weekend, and they had a biofeedback ball race, basically, or tug of war, right? And you hooked yourself up, and the other person hooked themselves up, and we were trying to get this ball to move into the other person's goal, right? Using biofeedback. It was amazing. And I love biofeedback for that reason. And using visuals like the window of tolerance really helps us to see, okay, when I do this, I feel like I'm getting into that window of tolerance, right? Oh, this thing happened. And then I thought this thought, and then I was outside of my window of tolerance, right? And so having that, just like watching, okay, well, when I read something on the wall, the ball moves, right? Or when I stare at the floor, though, the ball, oh, they're pushing it back towards me, right? I'm going to focus on something. Oh, I feel kind of calmer. The ball moves again, right? So having something visual like that, where we can kind of do that feedback for ourselves, allows us to check in on that throughout the day. And so because it can fluctuate so quickly, and so many things impact it. So am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I, have I had too much peopling, right? Just all of the things that can bring us out of that. And we were traveling with my daughter, and I think when I became a mom and could watch her do it, I started to get a lot more in touch with my own sense of that, because it used to be very, when we're talking about people pleasing, right? It was like I would sleep when it was time to sleep, and then I would eat if it was like an okay time to eat, right? Like, okay, you can eat at mealtime. And like, if I'm hungry at midnight, oh, well, that's not the time to eat, right? And then I would do it anyway, and then feel bad about being outside of that window, right? And so, but being able to say, no, those are the things, eating when I'm hungry and sleeping when I'm tired, and drinking water and going like, oh, my head hurts. Oh, I'm going to drink some water, right? Those things are going to keep me within that window as I go throughout the day, in those ups and downs of the day. And being able to say, oh, my daughter needs 10 minutes, like by herself in the shade, right? Or like, I need to take her aside so that we can talk for a few minutes and I can give her a hug. Those kinds of things just allow for that flow to go out throughout the day. And if we don't notice them in ourselves, and if we don't communicate to the people around us, when we have needs, right? Like my husband will be like, "You are tired, go to bed," or those kinds of things. When we don't communicate those things to the people around us too, then it's much spikier, right? Our day is much spikier. We deserve that kind of flow within that window of tolerance. So I love the visual of that. I think it allows us to do that feedback for ourselves and for other people.
I like that you said just giving permission, because I think most of us literally drag our body. Like, we are so disconnected from our bodies. We are like, it's like we are from our head up, and we're just dragging our bodies around. And if people are like, what do you mean? And it's like, just simply noticing, are you thirsty? Like, are you hungry? Like, we are operating on this autopilot. And when you really do tune in, it's like, oh, okay, this doesn't feel as like scary as I thought. This does give me a lot of like information that I can tune into.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you do speaking engagements on overcoming self-doubt, self-compassion, coming home to yourself. I like that. Can you give us some examples of these speaking engagements and things that people can expect from those?
Yes, absolutely. So I was in education before I transitioned into private practice. So I have spoke a lot to high schools and colleges, really on that, we were talking earlier about that belief that makes us feel so stuck. And I think that self-doubt, like we all have self-doubt, right? But sometimes it can hold so much power over us that it feels so limiting, and we feel so stuck. And it's funny. I was speaking on another podcast. I don't know. It was a podcast or something. And like, what are you talking on? And I said, overcoming self-doubt. And they're like, oh, the thing that we all like struggle with. So we all can relate. But I think I started speaking more to high school and college because I think maybe that was my younger self that struggled with that so much. So I'm like speaking to them, to me, to understand that it's a different way than one-on-one therapy, but it's saying, wait, like there is a way and you don't have to be hard on yourself. These thoughts are not actually they're just in this present moment. And is there a different way? Like, is there a different way? Do we have to beat ourselves up? And do we just have to accept this? Self-compassion is what is going to win every time. And when we just like allow this pain to exist and offer some self-kindness, like there's some optionality, but we weren't taught. Our society was like power through, just like keep fighting. So we have to like really practice like self-compassion, and like, what does that even mean? Like I talk about my own therapy journey a lot because I am a huge proponent of it. And one time my therapist was like, Reilly, you're being hard on yourself for not extending self-compassion. Like I knew I wasn't, but I was like being hard on myself that I wasn't extending self-compassion. So it's literally just like educating on what that even looks like. I don't think it was modeled to like have a relationship with myself, be kind, allow self-forgiveness. So what could that look like? Because when I started implementing that, that was like life-changing, but it took some time. And then those beliefs about myself didn't feel so strong. So I think I talk a little bit about my personal story and then like just things that they can do to just like action steps to move forward. And so since then, I've been able to speak to some women organizations, some corporations in Kansas City, and it's been really cool. It's been really cool.
Wow. So going through this experience yourself and going to counseling yourself, you're really modeling, you're practicing what you're preaching here for everybody. What was that like going to counseling, or how did you get involved in counseling?
I've had lots of experiences. My first experience, I was in high school, which was 25 plus years ago. So it was quite a long time ago. And I think my mom maybe just had like a friend that was a little bit more maybe progressive. I don't even know what the word would be, but I think my mom's friend was like, it was my older sister first. Like, I think Reagan, my sister, would benefit from counseling. And just, it was not a major traumatic event. It was just the life stressors and everything that like she was experiencing some anxiety and depression. And then I got to high school and I didn't even know I was experiencing it either. But I was really struggling, but I just thought that that's life. I just, like I would cry all the time. I'd be so hard on myself. And so my mom just suggested it, and I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. So I was like, okay, like and I think maybe because my sister had modeled it too, that I was open to it. And I just remember my therapist was like, you have such a mask on. And my mind was like blown. I was like, what? Like, she's like, this protective layer that you're not showing who you are. And it was such this small little shift, but I was like, who knew? Like, who knew? And it was just opened my eyes to learn that it doesn't always feel safe to like be our authentic self, and that, being vulnerable was the sign of weakness, but also you're just not showing your true self. And that's where I think when I wasn't showing up as myself, there was like anxiety and depression grew. So that was my first encounter. And I'm very fortunate because I think because of that, I have gone back to therapy multiple times in my 20s and 30s. And even now, somebody recently was like, Reilly, I think are you a lifer? Like, you're just always going to be in therapy. And I was like, well, it ebbs and flows, but I am a big proponent of it. I will be the first to say that I think we all can benefit from it. We all have struggle. And when we own our struggles, they don't hold as much power over us.
Have you had all great counseling experiences? Has it been easy finding a counselor all through life?
So you know what? I think it's an ongoing process. I am a therapist and I struggled to find one probably. I think we kind of have, for me personally, like we might have therapists for a long time, but then we kind of reach a new level and maybe there's supposed to be a new person in your life. And so I think maybe it was back in 2020. I thought, well, I'm a therapist. I know everyone in this community. And everyone I reached out to was not taking new clients, and it felt very defeating. And that is actually another reason I think I started posting on Instagram too. That sometimes it's not that first phone call and it's not a great experience, and you just don't like zoom in and you're like, whoa, so glad I did this. I think it's a little bit of a journey that you keep having to show up every day and ask yourself questions. And so sometimes your first encounter with a therapist can be great. Sometimes you have to try some. I eventually found one, but it was like, I feel like I know the ropes and ins and outs. I think a lot of times people out to me and they're like, okay, I need to see a counselor. I don't even know where to start. I was like, I knew all of those steps and I still struggled. Um, so I encourage people to just keep showing up and understand if not their first encounter isn't great, it's not always going to be. But giving them permission to keep trying.
Absolutely. It's every experience is different with counseling, and being able to do some of our own work. If we're on a waiting list for a certain therapist that we really want to work with, or even on a waiting list for a certain coach that we want to work with, we are empowered to help ourselves and check in with ourselves and do a lot of these things and learn some of these techniques and apply them. And then when we get to when we're up on the waiting list, right, we're coming in the door with more knowledge of ourselves that we can share with that person. And we can say, oh yeah, I tried this and that's actually working really well. So what else along that line, right? What's maybe my next step in that process or in that journey? And we're arming ourselves with knowledge about ourselves. We don't have to know everything about counseling. We don't need to know what therapy is to be learning all the time about ourselves. And I think once we get to a certain age, we have a tendency to kind of stop. We get kind of defined in our identities based on our relationships with other people, based on what we feel like might be our personality. And I loved what you said about having anxiety and not knowing it and thinking this is just who I am. This is my personality. And then being able to identify that, oh no, that's not my personality. That's my shield. Like that's what I'm trying to protect myself with, is that mask. And it always reminds me of the that movie, The Mask, with Jim Carrey, right? Where it's like
Yes.
the masks we wear, and he wants to wear that mask because he wants to get the girl, and he wants to be charming and engaging, right? And he doesn't feel that he is. And I think that so many of us wear them in different settings, right? We put on our parenting mask and we go do school pickup, right? And then we put on our work face and we go do that. And it can be difficult when we define ourselves by our roles and what we are to other people, to then take that away and have the bravery to look at, okay, what's left without those identifiers that we're using to say who we are and to feel significance and to feel importance and contribution in the world. And taking those masks off means that we have to take the risk that who we are underneath is valuable and is worthwhile, and that we will survive and not be outcast by society. And that is a risk. It's a big one. But taking that off or identifying that it is a mask is that first step. That is a huge step. So I love what you said about that. I love your dancing therapist way of reaching people. I think that is so fun. What was maybe your most popular tip or dance?
It was something about showing up authentically, and shoot, it went pretty viral. It was a good word. I should know it by heart. I think something about, you can show up with sort of this mask and you're still not going to be accepted. There's a chance you can try to turn and tweak and show up to be accepted, but that's still no guarantee. So like, what if we just start showing up as ourselves and, learning how to validate ourselves instead of looking outwardly, I think something like that.
What are some like tips or suggestions you have for people who maybe are on a wait list for therapy to practice that self-compassion at home?
So I take a deep breath because it's so, I think it's a buzzword. We hear it all the time and people are like, yeah, 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 I know, I know, I know. But it is so hard. So we say, okay, the first one we always hear is, how would you treat like a good friend or like a really special person? Like, how would you treat them? And so they're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm really kind to them. I can't do it to myself. And so it's like, okay, no, pause and really like, what would you say to this friend? And try to like affirm yourself. And when it feels so hard to extend that kindness to yourself, like then you recognize that there's pain and suffering there. And we have to allow that to exist. That if that doesn't exist, like, I mean, that's what we have in common with like humanity, right? Is like pain and suffering. And we have to allow it. And when we allow it, I think we can also then say like, oh, like this makes sense. And we can offer some kindness, but it's like a choice. We have to choose it every day. Like every day you have to wake up and say like, I am going to try to have a relationship with myself. Like you kind of said, like, oh, do I have all of these masks on? Like, can I like be more aware and start taking them down? And okay, so to have a relationship with myself, how does it look to even tune into my needs? And how can I choose kindness every day? But it's hard. So then there's some self-forgiveness that goes with it too. Like I'm just going to show up every day. And some days I'm going to get it right. And other days I'm going to try again.
Well, and it's like tracking any behavior. So if we've got a reading goal and we want to read 10 pages a day or we want to read 2 minutes a day, and as soon as we start tracking that, we've got opportunity for failure. So a lot of times what happens is we'll set that like intention into the world, right? I'm going to have more self-compassion. I'm going to be kinder to myself, I'm going to be more accepting of myself. Similarly, I'm going to read for 2 minutes a day. I'm going to read for 10 minutes or for 10 pages a day. And then we feel great for like 3 days. And then on the fourth day, right, we don't do it. We're beating ourselves up again, or we're like, I don't want to read today, and then we don't, but we notice it because we're tracking it, we're checking in on it every day. And so the thousands of days that maybe I didn't read a single page before I started tracking it, well, now when I start tracking it, it feels like, oh no, I fit, right? But I'm not thinking about all those days before. And so when it feels like, oh, I told myself I was going to be kinder to myself and now I'm not doing it, right? Now I'm going to beat myself up about that. Um, we can uh, we can know, and that's different from feel, but we can know that that's useful. It's useful to know that that's a day where I did not do that. Okay, what was going on? that day. And maybe I don't think about that in the moment because it just cannot. But maybe the next day I say, okay, I'm gonna think about this now that I'm feeling rested, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling better. I'm gonna intentionally think about what happened yesterday. What was going on? Where was I? Right? Like what needs were not being met for myself. And was that a need that somebody else could have met and didn't? Was it a need that I could have met and didn't? And how do I communicate that to my support people so that the next time that happens, I can get a little bit closer to feeling like I might want to be kind to myself in that moment, right? And what maybe can I do that would get me just that step closer? And having that feedback because we're aware of it, we're noticing it, is the most important piece. It is what is going to make a year from now feel just that little much better because I had that day and I had all of those days in a row that I didn't do it and I figured out why. So it's with the reading goal, right? Well, my book was upstairs. Right. And I was in the chair downstairs. I didn't want to read. And the remote was literally right next to me. Right. And so if I notice that the next day, I can go like, okay, I got to bring my book downstairs when I come downstairs, right? Or I got to leave it downstairs on the table on top of the remote. And same thing with being kind to ourselves is, okay, I'm going to try to say no to that person, right? My friend wants me to do something. I've already got something going on. I'd say, oh, I could make it work. It'll be real tight. I could do it, right? But also, I'm going to try saying no to that. And I'm going to see what happens. And it's a risk. It is a vulnerable place to set a boundary like that and say, no, I'm busy with this, right? Or I can't do that, or I don't want to do that. And it is a risk to do that. But at the same time, we can see that, okay, that person got their needs met another way, right? Somebody else can drive them to the store. Somebody else can paint their nails for them or whatever it is. And I don't have to be the only one who can drive them to soccer practice or whatever. So yeah, noticing that kind of thing, taking the risk is hard, but doing it slowly and doing those little tiny ones can really just build up that tolerance.
And we're going to make a mistake. I think our protective layers show up, like we're scared of judgment and criticism and rejection and all of that, but we're going to make a mistake. Like we are. And I love that you use the reading example because that's so tangible. Like we're going to miss some days. We're not going to read. But how can we not beat ourselves up? Like how can we really choose self-compassion every day? And I think asking for help is a huge sign of like somebody that is self-compassionate, like knowing what you need.
So you mentioned an online course about coping skills on your website. Are there other online courses or things that people can find on your website?
Yes. So I have the free one that is the, like, I think it's like 20 minutes and I've gotten some good feedback that they just said it was such a great starting point. And then I also have a, just kind of an intro to affirmations. I think, again, kind of like and it encompasses self-compassion too. How do we start learning to have a, better dialogue with ourselves and a relationship with ourselves, and just noticing that sometimes it is such this negative inner self talk and critic that's keeping us stuck. So how can we start saying kinder things, and how can we start extending self-compassion? It might not be, well, yeah, it'll be on my website in like the next week. So I'm sure by the time this is posted, it'll be there. And then I also do have an affirmation deck, which I love. It's something fun. You just pull a card every day, and I think sometimes we make these big, massive changes. And then other times it's like, no, I just need something small. And I need, it's like, we're looking for like when we go to Target and you're like, what do I need today? And it's like, wait, maybe I could buy something for myself that is going to like add some value. And so I've had some people that have just started pulling this. Actually, I probably have them somewhere close by, pulling a card every day, and they like say it out loud. And it's been such a small little shift, but it's been such a cool thing to see. So some things like that too.
Wonderful. I went to hot yoga one time and they said that was the first thing when you walked in the door. You pull a card and they say you're going to pull what you need for this session, and we pulled them, and it was so fun. It was great because it gave us that intention, but it also gave me more confidence walking in there. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm pulling what I need. This is going to kind of get me through.
I've done that in speaking events too. And I do think sometimes whatever you pull that day, like, oh, I needed to hear this and I needed this reminder, and I am like centering and grounding myself with it. So it's kind of cool.
Awesome. So, what suggestion might you give to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling?
That all of their uncertainty is so valid and real, and that makes sense. And that they also are so deserving and to feel better in whatever that looks like. And it makes sense that you're nervous, and you can still continue to go forward and continue, just maybe it's not right today, but like, don't just give up. Like, don't just say that's not for me. Be open to that. If you feel nervous, that makes sense, and you can still move forward. And I think have a really, hopefully, positive experience that's helped you, because like we talked about, like we don't even know that there's this like new way of being and doing and existing. And if that's possible, I want that for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if anyone listening wants to find Reilly's videos on Instagram, she can be found at Reilly Dodd, so ReillyDodd on Instagram, or her website is reillydodd.com for coaching and those online courses.
I am Reilly Dodd, and I need a counselor.
And I'm Krista Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.